Coming off of last week's win against Tulane, the Oklahoma Sooners were a team that found themselves in the center of attention, but maybe not for the reason that they wouldn't have wanted. And if we look around the landscape of college football right now, Oklahoma is a team that needs a strong showing in week 2. Luckily for the Sooners, they have Western Carolina, but today we need to talk about some areas that I'm looking to be much better for the Oklahoma Sooners in week 2, and I cannot wait to do so. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down in the comments, give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Do you believe we will see a Sooners team that is inspired to play this Saturday? And let me know what you're thinking. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification, because I do constant college football content and you don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoy that content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions, though small, are massive to content creators such as myself in getting picked up and maintained by the YouTube algorithm. But with all that being said, let's talk about this because the Sooners are a really interesting team right now. A team with a ton of talent but did not have the opening game that they would have liked. The Sooners came out in the first half, got stunned a little bit, but then really responded well, only for Tulane to really rally back in the second half. So, one of the questions we're looking for is, can the Oklahoma Sooners go out there and impose their will from start to finish? The talent is there. When we look from the coaching staff to the talent on roster, there's no excuse for it not to be able to be the case. And Lincoln Riley said they may have overlooked Tulane a little bit, and I don't expect them to overlook Western Carolina because they need a strong showing, and they need to go in there with the mentality that no matter who you play, you dominate from snap to whistle, right? Like, that's just got to be the mindset it takes to win a national championship. Now, luckily for the Sooners, not only do they have that good coaching staff, not only do they have the talent, but they also have tune-up games on their schedule that will allow them to continue progressing in the manner that they would like. Specifically, this week's game against Western Carolina, which will be a home game for the Sooners. If I'm looking at Oklahoma right now, there are a few areas where I could peg to where I'd like to see improvement, and I've kind of condensed them. And on the first one, I do need to elaborate a little bit. So the first area I think Oklahoma needs to show improvement, an area where I absolutely believe they will, is on the offensive line. Now, the reason why I ultimately believe they will have improvement along the offensive line is I do believe this offensive line has talent in the room, and ultimately, you have Bill Bedenbaugh as the offensive line coach, a fantastic offensive line coach, one of the premier line coaches in the nation. On top of that, Lincoln Riley, in theory, should be able to scheme some things to be able to help alleviate any pressure that the offensive line is giving and putting on his offense. So, that's the reason why ultimately I think that they will be better, but they have got to be better. There's no choice, and the reason is last week they were bullied physically at the point of attack. Now, they were able to correct that in the first half, but like I said, Tulane really rallied back in the second half, and the offensive line just never was able to gel in the manner that you would like to see. And because of that, Oklahoma's run game was adversely affected, because at the end of the game, when you were looking at it from the Sooners' perspective, neither Brooks nor Gray had the day that you would have liked. And when I went back and watched, I think that there were some times where maybe there was a missed hole. That's perfectly reasonable. But for the most part, they were just never really given the best of opportunities because of the lack of gelling and the lack of cohesion along the offensive line. Now, in Oklahoma's defense, I completely understand there were multiple new faces on that offensive line. It's week 1, first time against a live action opponent. If there was any time to struggle, it would be week 1. I always say it's not about how you start, it's about how you respond, which is exactly why I'm sitting here talking today about this game, because I'm interested in seeing the response. The challenge has been issued. How are you going to respond? Now, on the other side of the ball, the two areas in which I'm looking for Oklahoma to vastly improve is at the inside linebacker and secondary positions, and I'll start with the inside linebacker. I don't know that Western Carolina will really be testing your inside linebackers. I think they absolutely should after what we saw from Tulane. I think most teams will be testing them through pre-snap motion, but regardless, the interesting thing about the Oklahoma linebackers is that's a talented unit. Whether we're looking at Asamoah, whether we're looking at Agwebu, they do have talent in that room, right? But Saturday, they did not play with the discipline that you need your middle linebackers to play, especially if you're playing against a team that's employing pre-snap motion, because that pre-snap motion is meant to figure out what the defense is doing and create confusion on the defensive side of the ball. So it's meant to grant clarity to the offense and create confusion for the defense. And Tulane succeeded in their pre-snap motion by creating confusion on the defense and clarity on the offense, and they were able to attack based off of that. I'm not sure how much pre-snap motion Western Carolina would employ. I think every team in the nation needs to be running a heavy dose of pre-snap motion because it's that successful when you look at the analytics behind it, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not sure how much the inside linebacker position will be tested against Western Carolina. I think the secondary will be tested a little bit more because they have an individual, Raphael Williams, for Western Carolina. This dude is a dude, right? He is a certified baller. He's an individual that can stretch you. He's an individual that you have to look out for, and that's why I ultimately think the secondary will be tested for Oklahoma. When we watched Tulane play Oklahoma, they really picked on some of the secondary members for the Oklahoma Sooners, and I expect that to be corrected this week. Individuals are young in that secondary. They have some new faces back there, and it's going to be a unit that gels. Ultimately, I'm looking at the pass rush to be able to get home and alleviate some pressure on the secondary, because that's the whole reason why I wasn't necessarily too concerned about the secondary. If your front can apply the adequate pressure, I think everything else will kind of write itself home, so long as you have adequate secondary play. And when I look at some of the names in that secondary, I think there are guys that could be very solid football players. Billy Bowman, Latrell McCutcheon. But we need to see it on a more consistent basis, and the tune-up game is going to be big. Ultimately, between the inside linebackers and the secondary, I think both units are going to be units that we have to watch throughout the year as they come along. Both units are units that are going to have to play with a little bit higher intensity and a bit more discipline. I think that was probably the biggest crux to the inside linebacker position, is guys were almost too eager to make a play instead of allowing the play to develop and see itself out and allowing their preparation to take over, right? I think some guys were just so interested in trying to make a play and play fast, which brings me back to something I've always been told. Playing fast is great, so long as you're not making fast mistakes. Because if you're playing fast and making mistakes, you might as well not be playing fast at all. But all in all, I'm looking for the Oklahoma Sooners to have a monster game on Saturday and really send a message to the rest of the college football world. But with that, I'm very interested in hearing from y'all. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking about this. Do you believe that Oklahoma comes out inspired to play on Saturday? And which individuals for the Sooners are you looking at to have a big game? That's it. See ya.